terrible news out yesterday evening. Let's put this up there on the screen. U.S. personnel wounded in this attack against a U.S. base in Iraq. So the details are actually very scant. Unfortunately, it just says at least 5 U.S. personnel were injured in this attack against a military base, U.S. officials said, as the Middle East braces for a possible new wave of attacks by Iran and its allies following last week's killing of senior members of a militant groups by Hamas and Hezbollah. There were 2 Katyusha rockets that were fired at Al-Assad Air Base in western Iraq, according to 2 Iraqi officials. Iraqi security sources said that rockets fell inside the base. It was, quote, unclear whether this was linked to attacks by Iran. The Iranian-connected group Kata'ib Hezbollah in Iraq, Ryan, has claimed responsibility for the attack. And the big question remains, is this the precursor to a larger movement by the Iranian regime in response to both the United States and to Israel after that assassination of the Hamas leader in the middle of Tehran? But as of now, the region continues to boil, and this is just the first sign, perhaps, of what's to come.
And it's a good sign of how inflamed the region is, that you can't tell whether these types of attacks actually presage part of the coming Iranian retaliation or are just part of the bubbling conflagration that has been kicked off since October 7th. You also had Hezbollah launch some drone attacks on the north of Israel. Again, are those just the repetitions of attacks that have been happening for weeks and months now, or does this presage something bigger? You also don't know whether or not Iran directed this Iraqi militia to attack this U.S. base or gave a green light to it. And one problem that Israel is walking itself into through its assassination campaign, which the U.S. is also involved in the sense that they also assassinated Qasem Soleimani.
Right.
So Qasem Soleimani was the guy that basically had a lock on all of these militias across the region. It became a boogeyman. Trump assassinated him. After that, the grip that the Iranians had on all of these proxies is loosened just a little bit. Like that's how organizations work when you have such a kind of charismatic leader putting things. He'd been, for decades, he'd been putting this structure together. Then you get a new guy in place. He gets assassinated. And each time, the grip that Iran has on these proxies loosens a little bit. And maybe you'd say, well, that's a good thing because Iran is evil and they're doing dastardly things with these proxies. These proxies have their own capacity. And so cutting the leash might not actually be to the benefit of the U.S. or to Israel, because now we don't even know for sure. Is this Iraqi militia now just fed up at Iran's inability to protect the leaders of the axis of resistance organizations?
That is the very difficult thing, is we have no idea, is this directed by the regime or not? I mean, regardless, we got 5 guys who were injured. Don't forget, we had 3 U.S. service members who were killed in that base in Jordan on the Syrian border. It does, of course, raise the question of why are all these people over there exactly in the first place?
Why are American troops getting hurt in Iraq in 2024?
Members in Iraq, in 2024, more than 21 years after the initial invasion. Yeah, maybe somebody should be asking that question. Of course, most people just continue to go on with their lives.
Or Syria, for that matter.
Hear about this. Yeah, I mean, Syria, that's a whole other one. More than
you know where they're not getting attacked?
Where is that?
Afghanistan.
Oh, right. Oh, because we're not there. Oh, right. Interesting how that works, right? Well, the U.S. Secretary of State, of course, has very inspiring words and language after U.S. service members have been confirmed to have been injured in this attack. One apparently has been very seriously injured. Let's take a listen to what Secretary of State Blinken had to say.
A few words on the situation in the Middle East, because it is a critical moment. We are engaged in intense diplomacy, pretty much round the clock, with a very simple message. All parties must refrain from escalation. All parties must take steps to ease tensions. Escalation is not in anyone's interests. It will only lead to more conflict, more violence, more insecurity. It's also critical that we break this cycle by reaching a ceasefire in Gaza. That, in turn, will unlock possibilities for more enduring calm, not only in Gaza itself, but in other areas where the conflict could spread. So for the United States, for many other countries, both in the region and beyond, this is our focus. And what it comes down to, really, is all parties finding ways to come to an agreement not look for reasons to delay or to say no. It is urgent that all parties make the right choices in the hours and days ahead.
It is urgent they must make the right choices in all the days ahead, he says, as the U.S. continues to flood the region with U.S. service members. Let's put this up there on the screen. This was the Iranian media taking responsibility and kind of touting this attack on U.S. troops. The 2 explosions reported near Iraq's Al-Assad Air Base, which houses American service members. The IRGC says that Iran-backed militant groups have launched the rocket attack against the U.S. base. So the fact that the IRGC basically taking responsibility for the attack does tell us a little bit about, at the very least, they want to appear connected. President Biden reared his ugly head, as some say, put this up there on the screen, came out of nowhere. He's in the dungeon in the White House Situation Room, tweeted out this photo. He says, earlier, the vice president and I were briefed in the Situation Room on developments in the Middle East. We received updates on threats posed by Iran and its proxies, diplomatic efforts to de-escalate regional tensions, and preparations to support Israel should it be attacked again. Everybody really focus in on that one. We also discussed the steps we are taking to defend our forces and respond to any attack against our personnel in a manner and a place of our choosing. So that is always the Biden line, a manner and a place of our choosing. Doesn't mean very much, but what it does mean is that there are significant U.S. assets in the Middle East. Here we have actually a map. Let's put this up there, please, just to realize the sheer scale of everything that we have here. From an amphibious group, the USS Roosevelt, the USS Bull Kelly, you've got the Roosevelt Carrier Strike Group over there, the USS Russell, the USS Michael Murphy, the USS Cole, the USS Laboon, all of that basically poised all around the region, also both in a place where they can protect Israel should they need to use guided missile destroyers and other U.S. assets to shoot down anything incoming from Iran. You've also got them on the other side, basically just hanging out right next to Iran should they need to also interdict anything there, on top of the continuing, Houthi mission that happens with Yemen. So the situation is not good. You basically got the entire, Middle East surrounded there by U.S. naval assets. You don't even want to know how much this one is costing us, right?
Every minute. Just think about that.
Yeah, this is what people don't get in terms of the sheer dollars. Like, just think about that. You've got a U.S. aircraft carrier alone. It's like a floating city. Do you know how much money it costs just to make it move a single foot? And now thousands of feet, and then feed everybody on board and resupply this thing and keep it going, basically in continuum. And that's what we have signed up for the last 10 months. I would venture to say it's probably cost north of over $100 billion, probably just in the last 10 months. If we think about continuous operations, we know that it cost $1 billion in a single day just to shoot down those Iranian missiles that were launched on Tel Aviv or on Israel in retaliation for the embassy attack. But what do you think of this now so far?
It's asymmetric because the weapons that the Iraqi militia or Iran or Hezbollah or Hamas fire off are dirt cheap compared to what
$2,000
we cost.
Yeah.
Same with the Houthis.
Yes.
The Houthis are spending in the thousands of dollars for some of these rockets, and are sometimes going after drones that are worth like millions of dollars.
Right.
Like it's the asymmetry is completely unsustainable. Like we can sustain it for a very long time, but it's not indefinitely sustainable. Now those Blinken comments, a lot of people read his comments as directed largely at Israel, because Iran, the U.S. can say what it wants to Iran, and we can offer carrots, we can offer sticks about what the response is going to look like, but ultimately we don't have an enormous amount of leverage over what Iran is going to do.
Right.
We do have leverage over what Israel is going to do, but if you listen to Blinken there and you follow his body language, you would think that we had zero leverage whatsoever. That we're just out here after 3 days of not sleeping, just pleading with Netanyahu to just please stop doing all this stuff that you're doing. Please. It's not in anybody's interest.
Right.
And he keeps saying escalation is not in anybody's interests. That assertion has just been made over the last several months without being backed up by evidence. There is increasing understanding among the global diplomatic community that Netanyahu and a lot of elements of the Israeli government do actually believe that escalation is in their interest, and not for any obviously rational, like here's how we're going to win a regional war against Iran, but that the trajectory that they have put themselves on due to their response to October 7th has them headed towards international isolation and economic collapse internally, and political collapse and anarchy and chaos, as we saw over the last couple of weeks. And so therefore you need to flip the table. Like that's the closest that you get to a rational argument for why a regional war would actually be in the interest of Israel, that you need to just absolutely reset everything. And then sifting through the rubble and the ashes several years later, maybe people will forget what happened in the months after
it's basically
7th.
the U.S. 9/11 strategy, which they were warned repeatedly, but in the moment it makes complete rational sense for Bibi Netanyahu to escalate the war. You also have from the Financial Times I just read this morning that the new president of Iran says, quote, Iran will definitely retaliate against Israel for the killing of Hania, and said a response time for crimes and insolence as the U.S. continues to send its reinforcements. So we are definitely on a trajectory, which is not good right now.
And for people who haven't followed this is a new president who ran on closer ties with the United States.
I know.
And so Netanyahu's attack on Hania inside Iran was understood to be a provocation against this new Iranian government, because any diplomacy that gets the United States and any of Israel's adversaries closer to deal making, Netanyahu considers to be a threat. And that's why AIPAC is one of the lead opponents of the Iran nuclear deal, for instance, and pushed to have that blown up.
Yeah, it's very troubling. There was also so the U.S. finds itself in knots because it really doesn't know how to respond to any idea of quote unquote Iranian self-defense. So here we had a reporter that asked the U.S. State Department, does Iran have a right to respond for self-defense? If you continually acknowledge on the Israeli side, let's take a listen to what he had to say.
Do they have the right to respond? I mean, is that part of self-defense?
So as I just answered that question.
On the issue of self-defense.
I just answered that question in response to what I got from Simon. A right is one thing. Taking steps that are productive and are conducive to the interests of their people, that are conducive to the interests of the broader region, are another question. And in no way would a retaliatory action by Iran in any way serve the interests of the Iranian people or the broader region.
And that's precisely why I'm asking you, because you mentioned the word right. So you are acknowledging that they do have the right to respond.
No, I did not acknowledge that.
Okay.
I acknowledged the question.
Then let me ask you, if this was, let's say, happened in any of the Western capitals, wouldn't they be sort of obligated to respond?
I'm not going to deal with a hypothetical.
Okay, all right. We'll deal with something real. Last week, a week ago, yesterday, Sunday, an Iran rocket hit, or maybe intentional, hit a small town of Majil Shams, a Syrian town, Syrian citizens, and so on. And you said that Israel had a right to defend itself. I'm not you personally, but I'm saying. So what's different? I mean, everybody was, everyone was saying Israel has a right to defend itself. Why doesn't Iran have a right to itself when the guest house, I don't want to make comparisons, but it's like the guest house in London or maybe Blair House or anything. I mean, something that really touched the sovereignty of Iran.
So I take the point of your question, Saeed. It is not in any way, however, useful at all for anyone in the region for Iran to consider taking such steps because of the risk, as I said, that this could potentially get out of control. And that's the message we will continue to impress on them.
He is not acknowledging the right to self-defense. Now, I think this whole right to self-defense thing is annoying because, who bestows a right to a sovereign state? Nobody, okay? The legitimacy, I think, of its population. Those are the people who confer the right. The way that you check that quote-unquote right is where you have deterrence and you have enough weapons to make sure and to try and guide their defense. So there is no such thing as a right to self-defense. There's the ability to have self-defense and to try and guarantee that ability. And that, I think, this is where I look at with Iran. This is a blustering nation which for decades has held itself up as this check against Israel, against the West. What self-respecting nation can tolerate a guest being blown up in the middle of their most secure compound and the beginning of a presidential inauguration? It's not possible, as a self-respecting nation to tolerate that. Now, at the same time, they don't want to be suicidal, so they have to check and think about. But I would caution everyone to think that just because they don't respond right now does not mean that they don't have the ability or the fortitude and the foresight to actually set the stage where they can cause real problems. So for example, Russia, Sergei Shoigu, the former defense minister, is spotted in Iran, immediately after this attack. It comes out that the Iranians are likely to get their hands on the S-400 missile system. I mean, this is a real issue, okay? Like, this is sophisticated technology that the Russians don't just hand out to everybody. You can ask NATO planners and others about how well that system can work when it wants to, and that's just another both alliance between the Iranians and the Russians. It creates more problems for any future quote-unquote attack by Israel or by potential conflagration with the United States, and just ratchets up, how much worse the conflict would be when it already would be a complete and a total nightmare. So what do you think?
Yeah, and what makes it hard for us to analyze it here in the United States is that we are bathed in this kind of propaganda that Iran is the most evil country on earth and run by complete madmen. And it makes it very difficult to understand this fact, which is that Ayatollah Khomeini and also this new kind of US-leaning president are both very reluctant to take major risks.
Right.
But just saying that just clashes so kind of flagrantly with the idea that, well, I thought this is a bloodthirsty madman who just wants, Hitler-like domination of the world, and the only thing holding them back is, Israel and the United States constraining them. And so people who are watching Iran think that there might be a possibility here that, well, to your point, the longer delay we see in their response, the worse it might end up being.
Right.
But on the other hand, there's a possibility that they do not take a severe response, that they do something similar to what they did last time for the geopolitical reasons that you laid out. They are now successfully positioning themselves globally as a rational actor in contrast to the unhinged, irrational Israeli actor in the region. And so if they go over the top and break international law in their response to what Israel did to Hania inside Tehran, then they upset that balance that they've been able to strike. And they like this new kind of global perception that they're a sane and normal country and Israel's completely out of control. So they have a lot of incentive to actually keep that going. If they can keep it going, it makes it easier then for Russia to send the kinds of weapon systems that you're talking about. It makes it easier for China to be more tightly invested in the economy, and if the more that they are seen as a rogue state, the harder it is for Russia and China to kind of bring them into the fold.
And then the final thing that I worry the most about is the sheer hubris of the American system and the American foreign policy elite to just think, yeah, this is no problem. Hundreds of billions of dollars, cool, don't worry about it. Two-front war, what a joke. Of course.
Yeah, we can handle that.
We can handle that. Aaron Mate flagged this clip of President Biden speaking just, I think, last October, and scoffing at the idea that America was not prepared for a two-front war. Let's take a listen.
Are the wars in Israel and Ukraine more than the United States can take on at the same time?
We're the United States of America, for God's sake. The most powerful nation in the history, not in the world, in the history of the world. The history of the world. We can take care of both of these and still maintain our overall international defense. We have the capacity to do this, and we have an obligation to. We are the essential nation, as to paraphrase the former Secretary of State. And if we don't, who does?
I believe he was trying to reach for indispensable nation. It does not age well, if we think a little bit about it. That was in the hubris of the Clinton administration, and that is where his age just is so, grating to anybody who has lived through two failed wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, to see the strain that the two-front war of Iraq and Afghanistan put on the U.S. military. There at the time, we're not even fighting like real peer competitors. The America that exists in his head is gone, and it's largely gone because of people like him with limitations. Already we faced, look, I've been tracking the situation and continue to track it almost daily in Ukraine. Well, it turns out that the Ukrainian, the average age, 45, 50, starting to get acknowledged. We sent F-16s over there. That's going to turn the tide. Nope, I just checked this morning. A strategic town in the east is literally on the brink of falling. Ukrainian manpower disaster. So just because, you can pour money into this thing and try and appear tough and feel cool doesn't mean that the Russian Colossus, which basically can produce weapons for 1/10 1/10 the cost and has basically unlimited manpower through its vast reserves on top of a total war economy can't quite easily overcome that in the long run. Yes, in the short term, you've cost them some damage. But I mean, if anything, we battle tested the Russian military. We helped them, reform its economy for total war production. Who's the loser here? It's definitely that. It's not them. Like,
we certainly did the opposite of degrading the Russian military. The Russian military of 2024 and 25 is much superior to the one of 2021 and 2022.
Right. And it's just, when we think about that, we think about here, with the continued situation with Iran, the speed in which this can get out of control is just one that we should never underestimate. Perhaps some good news just came across the wire. Russian President Putin has asked the supreme leader for, quote, a restrained response to Israel's killing.
Exactly.
So this really backs up exactly what you're saying.
Russia and China see this as a way to make the U.S. and Israel look insane,
like the aggressor states,
and that they can no longer responsibly run a hegemonic kind of global operation.
Yes. All right. Well, that certainly does kind of tell us.
We're certainly helping every step of the way in creating that.
Continued U.S. Decline in position for us in the world. 5 of our service members injured. And can anybody credibly answer the question, for what? No, they can't. So everyone's just going to memory hole it, and we'll continue to move on. Hey, if you like that video, hit the like button or leave a comment below. It really helps get the show to more people.
And if you'd like to get the full show ad-free and in your inbox every morning, you can sign up at breakingpoints.com.
That's right. Get the full show, help support the future of independent media at breakingpoints.com.